Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll bring it to a vote. All members in favor of the approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. We move on to the next order of business, approval of minutes. I know Nancy sent out the draft minutes back on August 3rd. I don't know if everybody had time to review them. Is there any discussion as far as the minutes as they were presented?
No.
The chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes at this point.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion by Tom to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
Second by Paul. Any discussion?
No.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. We now turn it over to public input.
The Parks and Rec office has not received any public input at this time, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, sir. We'll move on to item number 6, which would be the committee members report. I'll defer that over to Stephen as well. You're asking for individual tree board committee members?
If they have anything from the
Okay.
last meeting to report,
Okay.
on any assignments that,
So
or projects that they were working on.
I'll just go individually, I guess. Tom, do you have anything to report?
Yes, I guess I do. I think in the last meeting, it was mentioned that trees along Douglas Avenue were getting too bushy and cars were getting scratched, and I think the problem has been taken care of.
Okay. And I know that's further down on our agenda, so I'll have you elaborate on that at that point in time as well.
Sure.
Okay. Did you have anything else to report? Paul?
I have nothing.
Nothing? Shannon?
Nothing to report.
You, Stephen?
The only thing would be that we've investigated, and I know it's discussion item number, or letter J, but we have researched, our team has researched alternative ways that I know we discussed about doing research, alternative ways to finding a happy medium between tree guards and the damage that weed eaters can do, the string trimmers, sorry, to be specific. So done some of that, and we'll be ready to present, not complete solution, but provide what recommendations we're looking into, and then get others on the board recommendations from there.
Okay. Is that all?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and as far as my report, this will tie in with Shannon. We had a meeting this morning with Beth Corrigan from Planet Geo, and that's the tree inventory software. And we had actually scheduled a meeting in order to be able to export the data into a usable format. But turns out I do have administrative privileges through the state's licensing agreement, and that will continue until the software's expiration in 2023. And if it's extended, I'll still have access to all the data that I have access to right now. So even though we won't be able to actually inventory off the tablets after September 19th, I believe, we could still do updates to trees that are removed or mitigated. I'll just have to do that manually through the computer. But we'll have access to the full data, and I know both Shannon and I were really pleased with knowing that, because we were trying to figure out ways that we could pull that data to make it useful for not only ourselves, but for the city especially. So we will continue to have that access.
Mr. Vice Chair, I know that we had discussed as far as jointly, or if we needed to get other agencies involved, or if it needed to be the city of Las Vegas to pay for the licensing further in order to continue inventory. Do you have any recommendations, or does any other board members have any recommendations?
We talked about that at length with Beth as well, and Shannon and I are all in agreement that the amount of money that it costs to renew, which is right around $6,000, isn't really going to be worth it unless it's going to be a tool that's utilized like daily and upkept daily. At this point in time, we don't see a need for that. So it wouldn't be something that we'd recommend that you go out and try to secure funding for, because we don't see a value in extending that. And I think that $6,000 is yearly. So it's not a cheap program.
Well, it's for the subscription for 3 years, but
For 3.
use that $6,000 to address the hazard trees. So we have baseline data, which is good, and
Okay.
then the city can, Gerald's gonna retain that access, and it seems like the state's gonna trend on continuing to use this company. So we'll still have the access, and if, in the future, if we decide that we need to update an inventory, we can set it up where we can redo an inventory in a few years. But right now, the baseline data and action on those baseline trees that are a problem, we accomplished a lot. They accomplished a lot with that. So
Yeah.
there's no need to subscribe
There's
to
no
that,
need.
to pay
It-
anything.
And I like your idea about flipping that money into actual on-the-ground work, because that's actually what's gonna help you folks leverage future funding. If that input isn't there from the city, it's kind of dead in the water.
And
you
that's
know?
what, that was the point of the inventory, is to kind of show what is the situation, what is the budgeting needs, and how do we get there? So this was a successful project.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you,
Yes, sir.
Vice Chair.
So I don't have anything else to report on that end. So we'll go ahead and move on to our next order of business, which is our discussion items. So we have the Riverwalk tree hazard removal. I believe you have information on that, or not?
I may have, it wasn't an item that I put on this agenda, but it may be addressing, and we did discuss it yesterday in the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee meeting. There was a willow that fell 2 weeks ago. Mr. Vice Chair, is this what the, I'm assuming that's what this is.
I believe that's what it is, yeah. I don't know with 100% surety, but that would be a reasonable
Okay.
discussion item.
So we did have a willow tree that fell south of Ridge Street, south of, I guess it's in between the two pedestrian bridges. And we are scheduled early next week for the Parks Department to remove that.
Are you gonna be removing the tree or just that branch that fell?
The branch that fell. Unless there's different recommendations from the tree board.
That tree does need to be removed entirely because it's got a lot of trunk rot.
Okay.
But I think a viable temporary solution would be to remove that limb that fell to mitigate the safety hazard. And then I think you could plan the removal of the remainder of it at a later date. But the limb that fell, the limb in question, was actually the weighted portion of that tree, and it was directly opposite of all the rotten wood at the base. And that was one that Elizabeth had identified as a needs to come out soon tree. And nature did its thing and kind of pruned it for us, but I think if you take that limb out, mitigate that safety hazard, and then put a plan in to take out the remainder of it, it does need to all come out.
Okay. And I'll go into further detail about, start addressing some of the tree hazards when we're talking discussion item F.
Okay. So I believe we've addressed that one. We can move on to the next line item, which is the purchase of the Chanticleer pears along Douglas Street. I don't know if you have anything to add into that.
I don't have anything. I know that Mr. Chair, Dr. Spencer had mentioned that he had had a discussion with the city manager. I know the previous city manager, Dr. Taylor, had approved for this purchase to come in the fall.
Right.
And I believe, now, I know that this discussions that Dr. Spencer and Mr. Maestas had, but I believe that the city still has a commitment to purchase those.
I had heard the same thing too, but I'm not going to speak as to whether it is definitive or not, but, I think maybe we can just kind of address that at the next,
I think
the next meeting.
table it to the. yeah.
Table it to the next meeting and make sure it appears on the agenda. So we'll allow Dr. Spencer to go ahead and elaborate on that. So then we'll move on to our next line item, which is the Douglas Street tree pruning, and I'll let Tom fill you in on that. I know him and Elizabeth did a lot of good pruning work down in there. Some of your staff supported him, but I'll let you go ahead, you and Stephen go ahead and talk about that.
Well, that's last month? No, this month, I think. Last month and this month. We went down to Douglas Avenue, starting at 5th Street. And then we just went west from there. There are a lot of purple leaf plum trees along that block. Some of them in not so good shape, but we pruned them as best we could to, for both pedestrians and vehicles parking there. I think we did a good job on it. So we got it from 5th to 6th to 7th Streets. And we finished up on the south side of the street and did some. Those trees are in better shape, and it was very fortunate. I really like pruning trees that haven't been touched by other people. I have less damage repair to do when I do that. So I think they came out real well. People who went by were thanking us. Don Price was wondering what the hell we were doing out there. And once he saw it was me, I know Don, and he said, well, great. So he never did come out with the promised lazy boy chair that I requested. Even though he has lots of them, you might want to put that in minutes. Don Price's lazy boy chairs. And it worked out pretty well. I think we got 16 or 17 trees pruned, albeit all small trees from the ground. They had to be pruned in an oval. Bird's eye view would see an oval of these trees instead of a nice round shape that fruit trees should have. And it was because had to cut back from the street, cut back from the sidewalks a little bit. So I think they look pretty natural, although I still maintain that that ain't the place for fruit trees. And that's it.
Make sure you mark that as part of your in-kind that Nancy requests at the end of the year for the Tree City application.
Oh, the time?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Anything your folks devoted to that too. Always anything tree related, make sure you folks keep good documentation on that so we can provide that for our certification.
We'll do that. We'll make sure Alexis will help assist us with that and making sure we have that log within the city department as far as for
Right.
Parks Division. I do want to give a special thank you to Tom.
Thanks.
Tom Lamberth. Just thank you for being so flexible and accommodating.
Sure.
Because it is, like we had a discussion on the phone, it's such a challenging time for our parks employees with the season that we're in as far as high maintenance for the parks. And it really does inhibit our ability to work on projects and develop more education. But I want to thank you for the education and the time you did give. And you devoted, I think it was more than 2 days, wasn't it?
3.
3 days. And then also Miss Elizabeth Gardner as well.
Oh, yeah.
Because she assisted with that as well. And we're very appreciative. And it looks tremendous, the difference. We've got nothing but compliments. So my hat goes off to you folks, and I'm very appreciative. And hopefully the Parks Division this winter season, we have a quarter of the year that we don't have a growing period. And at that time, we're hoping that Tom will come in and give an educational class to our Parks Division employees.
Sure, I'd be up for that.
Just to expand on the knowledge of proper pruning.
Yeah, I'll bring the tools, you bring the donuts.
Okay,
So-
sounds good. We can do that. We can do the
Okay.
donuts. So once again, thank you again, Tom and Elizabeth, if you
My
watch
pleasure.
this later on, or if you're
Oh,
watching this now.
Nancy as well, she was there.
Nancy was there too, so thank you to Nancy.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so we'll go ahead and move on to our next order of business, which is the core park trees. I'll defer that over to Mr. Stephen as well.
Now, I know this one was on there. I believe that the board has provided already, if I'm correct, Mr. Vice Chair, a printout of for Carnegie Veterans Plaza and Lincoln.
I'll let you know what transpired there. Dr. Spencer came into the office last week And he, I guess, had spoken to Mr. Maestas, and Mr. Maestas indicated that he would like a list of trees that needed to be worked on. And through the software, I was able to pull up 60 trees that were marked as critical safety concerns for some, whether it be deadwood or whether it be other issues. So I printed that list for Dr. Spencer, and he was able to get that over to Mr. Maestas. So off of there, I guess they will direct you, or however that's going to work, as to which trees need to be addressed. I am willing to further help you folks with that determination if you guys need, because 60 trees is a lot to filter through. Some of those aren't necessarily in the parks. So I can pull that list up again and we can go through and find out which ones are. But I can let you know now, probably the ones I think that are our biggest safety concern right now are some of your trees along the river park. And I know that's not one of the core parks.
It will become, it's becoming.
But right now, there's some quote-unquote widowmakers that are in the trees that are hanging dead limbs that could severely injure or kill someone. So if you're looking for safety trees, for potential for loss of life, and those would be the trees I would mitigate first.
Okay.
And we can do a walkthrough if you need to on those, and we can point them out to you. But I think as far as my recommendation would be that those should be the trees that are addressed primarily are the more dangerous trees. And this one only filtered for critical safety concern, but it doesn't mean that it's something that could hurt or kill somebody today or tomorrow. So.
No, I know that I was on leave at that time.
Right.
I was out when Dr. Spencer met with Mr. Maestas, so I'm sure, I have a follow-up meeting with Mr. Maestas this week, so I'm
Okay.
sure we're gonna discuss it at that point. But I know that prior to me going on leave, I had, or taking some time off, I should say, leave, I guess, hints at something else. Before taking time, I had told Mr. Maestas, and I believe I had mentioned it to Dr. Spencer, that every 2 weeks for one day, I would be dedicating that day myself to assist in the removal or the trimming, whatever was required. I will work with you, Mr. Vice Chair, on maybe later this week, we can schedule a time to do a walkthrough so that we can schedule that in for next week to see if we have any additional time outside of the removing the limb that fell, the willow there in the Riverwalk.
Okay.
But I know that my current staff, and we were going to talk about it in F, but current staff does not have their proper training, and I know you have been part of that to help provide some of that education. Yourself, Mr. Vice Chair, and Thierry Montes, we're educating. But at this time, until we can provide the proper training, I know that myself and your office will utilize the three of us to help work on getting some of this removal or pruning or trimming that needs to be done.
Shannon?
One of the things that we've talked, I don't know if that's been talked about recently, but the city's insurance on the staff only covers them working up to like 10 feet. So just make sure that whatever work you guys are doing, I don't know if that's been brought up before, that you guys are aware of what the limitations are on your staff since they're not trained as arborists, which is, that's a consideration. You probably need to look into it further.
Definitely, and that's another reason that since we had, and they weren't doing anything above 10, but we had for the Unity Orchard, some tree removal moving forward. Since that point, I believe that was in April, Mr. Vice Chair?
I
May?
believe so, yeah.
That, as a director, I would be the only one until we had the proper
Okay.
training that we would be doing any of that work.
That's, I thank you for bringing that up, because that's really something of valid concern. I think that the city does need to really look at, because a lot of these hazards are probably in the 30, 35, 40-foot range, you know, and if it's not something that even you should be doing safely, that really needs to be brought to the attention of management so that it can be mitigated. Or
And that's why we were getting grant money to bring in contractors, but if the city's able to bring in a contractor, which is a whole other
Yeah.
But, that's why, yeah, that's why.
And I know Mr. Maestas wants to make a commitment to, obviously can't do all 60 financially right away, but he wants to start progressing to, if it's 2 or 3 at a time, then we do 2, 3 at a time.
Yes, something.
Okay.
Moving on it at all is great.
Right.
Thank you.
So there is support from both mayor and council, and then definitely from the city manager, Mr. Maestas. I know you folks have done a lot of work for a lot of years and sometimes didn't really see the action from, but
We're not talking. you guys
We're not gonna go there.
We have your support. We're glad to have your support, and we're here now.
so you have the support. We're here and we're gonna move forward.
I only look forward, I don't look back, so.
So,
Alrighty, so you have anything else on your core trees, or
no, sir.
anybody have any discussion or anything to add into that? Nope. Seeing none, we'll move on to your Parks Division report.
And I believe that this was, Mr. Vice Chair, this was just tabled from the last meeting because we didn't get to discuss it.
Right,
It's been discussed in the July meeting for the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, but I also wanted to present it to the tree board on what we're looking at. Currently, we cover over 1,000 acres in the city of Las Vegas, the Parks Division, that we take care of and in charge of the maintenance. The national average for acreage and a park maintenance worker is 1 to 10. The national average is the New Mexico average is 1 parks employee for every 40 acres. And right now, we're averaging about 1 for every 166 here in Las Vegas. But I do want to state that a full-time position and a part-time position has been added by mayor and city council. I know that if they had the ability financially to do it all in one fiscal year to bring us all the employees that we needed, but they have approved that, and we're in the process of looking at hiring those folks currently. So I know that there has been support from mayor and council to provide the financial assistance to get us where we need to be number-wise as far as employees. And I know the goal is to have, with the supervisor, a total of 11 parks employees.
what do you have currently?
Currently, we are at 7. And soon we'll be at 8.5. So I do want to give mayor and council credit for that they have, within a year's time, cut that gap in half. So that 166 is going to go down significantly. I think once we can hire, it drops it to about 130. So we're getting closer.
All right, is that all you have?
And that's all, yeah, it was just real general information, but just to express out there, it's not, I know sometimes there's a negative light that the Parks Division doesn't want to do much in parks, but these parks employees are doing a lot. They're doing the job of 4 people. So they work hard, they're out there in the elements, and I appreciate the work that they're doing, and I appreciate the support that mayor and council has given to ease a little bit of that workload that they have, and so that the public can see a difference.
Well, I really honestly think that that's probably information that should be put out to the public, because I don't think a lot of people know how severely understaffed and under budgeted you are. Because I know last meeting you shared with us also what your maintenance budget is for the year, and I cringed when I heard the number, right?
Yes, it's $20 a year per acre.
Per acre, right?
Yeah.
So $20,000 for the year for maintenance is what they have to work with out of that department. So I do think it'd be worth putting that out there so that people could understand, instead of being critical of what's not being done, maybe it can be used as a campaign to educate people to say, this is what we have to work with. We're putting forth the best effort we can with what we have. Well,
What kind of budget do, excuse me, cities of similar size have for their parks department? Let's say Taos, do you know?
Taos, I'm not familiar. I have done last fiscal year in the spring. I did do a site visit with Ruidoso. They are about 5,000 less in population. they receive 10,000. I'm sorry, I'm trying to make sure I give, so they receive 10,000 per park and 20,000 per field. So there's a significant amount, but I know that mayor and council has reached out and has expressed that, and we're starting the motion, and it's a perfect time to bring it up, Paul, and I appreciate you bringing it up, is that they really want, and any recommendations, like you were saying, Shannon, here's the trees that we need, this is what's gonna be the cost, this is the recommendation of the tree board, and then I take that recommendation and present it to mayor and council. And they want myself as a director to start doing that, not only with the tree board, but also direction from the recommendations from the Park and Rec Advisory Committee, so that they fully know that the needs are, and it's been a discussion of what's needed in
Shannon?
our city.
And those communities have a completely different tax base, so that needs to be noted. I mean, they're completely different dynamics.
Yes.
So that's apples to oranges. But tree board has always been an advocate for the park. So, you know, we want to try to lay out what's there, what the needs are, and try to help build the parks. And we've always tried to be an advocate for them. So with training and materials and grants. But there are going to be grant opportunities. We can start looking at treating hazardous trees again. Let's get some of those things out of the way. And so we're reducing the hazard. So in the next year, we have grant funding that's been kind of sitting there dormant because of COVID. So let's talk Gerald and Tree Board and maybe put together another one of those proposals this coming year.
Right, and that's the thing, that the district has always participated as the financial partner for a lot of grants and whatnot, and if the most direct, easiest route is to work directly that way again, I certainly would offer the services of the district in that regard as well, until you folks maybe have a grants person in place that could do that directly. So we have an excellent partnership with State Forestry, so I will offer those services to you folks again.
And not to put him on the spot, but just with his wealth of knowledge, Mr. Hendrickson, Bill Hendrickson, Community Development Director, has joined us about 10 minutes ago. But Bill, are you familiar with any other budgets of other similar municipalities in the state?
No, not really. I was
Okay.
thinking about it as you were talking.
Okay.
And, but it should be easy enough to find. Yeah, I know some of the other cities, but they don't have trees, so, which makes a big difference, obviously.
We found in Las Vegas that $10,000 to $20,000 goes really far with removing trees. I mean, we're small, and a small amount of money goes really far, so we
It does.
pack a punch with a small grant. So
It does, and the thing is that the tree board's been very excellent in providing in-kind to the in-kind match for the grants that come from State Forestry and whatnot. The district also does that, so as far as in-kind for potential grants, it's there. We just gotta all work together to make them work, so. We'll get together with Shannon and we'll figure that out, and if there's monies we can bring forth in the next year, I'd definitely like to pursue that.
I
Awesome.
think the street trees, it's time
Yeah.
before they're blowing down, and let's get it done.
Okay.
We'll work together and get it done.
We'll schedule a meeting, the three of us, if that's what you'd like,
All right.
and we can go ahead and figure out a game plan.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
More meetings, no, just kidding.
Right.
So I guess we probably transitioned into F as well, so that's fine and dandy. We'll go ahead and move on over to the next order of business, which is Tree of Heaven, noxious weed problem. I know last time we talked about the noxious weed that was in that island over there at the plaza. They still haven't extracted it. Do you know when that's going to happen?
They haven't. We had discussed it in a department head meeting a few weeks ago. I spoke with the utilities director that's overseeing, her department's overseeing the construction there at Bridge Street and Plaza. And they hadn't removed it, but it is on the schedule to be removed. The only holdup is for us to go and dig it out is because there's currently a construction project going on, and we don't have unless we get consent from the contractor. But the
Okay.
contractor has confirmed with us that they are gonna remove it.
Okay.
I've got a question, I guess it would be for Gerald. It seems like to remove that tree of heaven, to just pull it out, you're gonna leave, because it suckers so much, it leaves all those roots intact and viable. Wouldn't it make sense to cut it off and paint it with milestone or something so that it could start the process of killing the root system before just pulling it out?
Well, the issue with that is that if you go ahead and do that cut and stump treatment, that thing needs to overwinter. So you wouldn't be able to pull it till spring for it to be effective. So that's definitely going to hinder progress as far as the project goes. From what I understand, that island is going to become some sort of a concrete median, right?
There's gonna be very little landscaping in that median.
Right, so the potential for it to come back would probably be lower. And I think in that case, we would be reactive. If we do start seeing sprouts or whatnot, we would feel comfortable doing an herbicidal treatment at that point to mitigate that. But as far as the stump treatment, and that would delay its extraction until after spring. So I don't think that's viable right now. Had we caught it maybe earlier this year, then probably be okay, but it doesn't have enough time to be drawn down into the root system.
One thing I noticed just today, going around the plaza, and I didn't stop and check it out closely, but I think there's a tree of heaven coming up in front of Plaza Antiques.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
just talked about that before you came in.
Yeah, and there's actually, it's a lot more in existence than what people think. It's real heavy on parts of some of the west side of town, along South Pacific. There's some on Independence, in quite a few areas. You know, I know yards that are completely overrun with this thing, you know, vacant lots, vacant homes. It's definitely an issue already here. It's not just there at the park, but I'm hopeful that through the district, we can actually do some type of educational program where people can come forward and do a report a weed problem, and we can kind of engage those folks in some type of mitigation efforts. It's probably easier for us to do that than it would be for you folks to. But as part of our noxious weed program, I hope we can address some of that before it becomes more problematic than it already is. But if you folks definitely see some, let somebody know, let us know. And if we can get out there and treat it, I know Stephen's been really good about allowing us to do, we can actually even do an MOU if we need to, but for spot stump treatments in areas that are still city-owned, where we can address things like that rather quickly and not let them propagate themselves. I'd be open to doing that. So, does anybody have any other input on the tree of heaven? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the next portion of that, is the tree donation. I'll defer that over to Stephen.
So there is a member, a citizen in the city of Las Vegas that would like to donate. This one says 30. I'll go with the 30. It's closer to 30 size. Foot blue spruce. We did get direction. I know Dr. Spencer had gotten direction from an actual professional that does transplanting of this magnitude on this size. I know that there is some hesitation on the recommendations based on the amount of water that goes into the Plaza Park, because the idea is to get it transplanted and get it transplanted into the actual Plaza Park. That does get, now in the growing season, water daily. Each zone gets anywhere between 45 minutes to 60 minutes depending on the temperatures. Yes, ma'am,
And
please.
Nancy had said that the professional that looked at it said transplanting it wouldn't be viable and it would cause structural damage because it was close to the house. So I think there was a lot of things against working against that tree.
So at this point, we are having a follow-up meeting this week with Mr. Maestas, the city manager,
Okay.
with the utilities director, Maria Guilloveri, and myself, to present that information that Dr. Spencer has presented to us,
Okay.
and see if we need to go further and have mayor and council make a decision.
And we could, tree board can write up a recommendation if you would like. That's something
That would be amazing. Yeah.
That's what we've done in the past, so we can write up a recommendation.
Yeah, and you know, it'll definitely be, unfortunately, what you don't want to hear, but I know you had asked me about that personally, and I talked to Shannon and a few others, and we don't feel it's a good idea for location, for species selection. Now, especially knowing its proximity to the house, the ability to pull out a viable root ball, there's so many things against that tree. However, I did hear along the way that was recommended possibly that it could be planted in that parking lot over by this old Safeway parking lot.
Yes, on Douglas and 7th.
Right, so I think maybe in that location, possibly with a big enough cutout, with proper mulching, with other things, might be a better location for it. It's still gonna have a lot of the issues that we talked about, but as an alternative, I think that would be a better,
We'd have a better way to manage the amount of water
exactly,
that it's receiving.
right.
Where is this tree?
The tree is located, it's, I don't wanna, it's west, it's in town. It is on the West District, west of the plaza. I don't wanna point too much on the meeting, because I don't want people going by the
Yeah,
resident
to go look it up.
that was, I know that the resident had expressed concern that, because it's we met with the son and the owner of the property and of course of a tree, really wanted to see it in the plaza. They would still consider if it were to go to Douglas, but that's just some of the factors. Of course, we're not gonna make the ultimate decision, we're just gonna present the information to,
It's a good opportunity for an educational experience, and they will need, if the city accepts it, I would make it really clear that it could still die, so that you don't get
Oh, yeah.
on the bad
Yeah,
side of
yeah.
the citizen for that.
Well,
So just point of information, what's the viability of the tree, that species, and that size,
Not good.
in this climate being transplanted?
Very bad, very poor. I mean, we can put that in our recommendation.
I see survivability as being in the low 10s, 15%.
Single digits.
Yeah.
At that location especially, at the park. And even in the other location, actually, for survivability, it'd probably be better off in the park because it's gonna get the water it needs. But I know Elizabeth had proposed a pretty radical approach to being able to extract it.
So who's paying for the I mean, that's gonna cost
Yeah,
thousands.
it's not cheap to pull it out
the
either.
rough estimate was 3,000.
Yeah.
Would you have to hire a tree spade to come in and?
It wouldn't fit in there.
Yeah.
It'd have to be done by hand.
And I think the recommendation was
I
a
mean, you're gonna need
96
crane
inch.
truck to load that.
Yeah.
It's just not, it's a
It-
very
it's-
genuine and nice thought, but the technicalities of it are.
And it is, it's a beautiful tree, and it's a great thought.
And here's the other thing too, I do have some practical experience from Highlands when I worked there. We used to decorate all the spruces at the entrances of the buildings for the light parade, right? They look cool. Well, in doing so, we beat the heck out of the leaders on them and virtually killed all the trees. So the fact that it's gonna become the permanent Christmas tree for the city sets it up for a virtual beatdown, I guess, from decoration. So with all those things in consideration, you're setting this tree up to fail miserably. And that's would be my recommendation, is it's not a good idea.
We'll provide a good write-up in the council.
Yeah, we'll
Educated decision.
justify it.
Okay.
And, you know, as part of the tree board, we realize that our role is only advisory. You know, the city will make its own determination, but you have enough expertise on the tree board, I think, to render a qualified opinion, so we will go ahead and get that to you.
Okay.
I'll have Dr. Spencer send that to you. We can help him write that up, but we'll have him. Do you want an email or
Email would be great.
email? Okay. Does anybody else have anything to add to that discussion?
I just for the record, the family that's looking at donating, so if they see this, I just want to say that it is a beautiful tree and that we're appreciative, and everything will be considered.
It's a very genuine thought, definitely.
Yeah, it is, it's awful, you feel torn being in this position, having to tell you it's not a good idea, right? Because you see that's a valuable tree, and they want to make that donation, but we, on the other hand, have no and understand what its fate is going to be. And in that, it's hard to say no, it is, but that's the right answer, I think.
As an alternative, I wonder, it's not the same as having a living tree there, but would they be willing to donate it as a Christmas tree? For one season, it would be in the spotlight rather than...
I don't think that question has been asked.
Okay.
Yeah, if they have to do removal, then it could be posted as.
That could be the tree for this year, right? Yeah.
So I know part of the options also we're putting a plan together is an alternative if we had a permanent pot or a hole that's more stable than what the temporary usually that it's used in the park.
I thought you were gonna tell me you're gonna put an artificial tree.
Yes, like the cell phone towers, so that would generate some funds for the park. We're actually gonna put a tower.
That could
I'm
be
just
a
joking.
Wi-Fi tower for the
Right.
park, though.
And then it helps with the security cameras. No.
The barrel has not worked.
No, I think that'd probably be a viable thing, and Shannon and I had this conversation. It is not wrong to cut Christmas trees every year, because in a lot of these overgrown forests, that's the only type of removal thinning operations you have, is the removal of all that understory. So I'll go on the record as saying it is not wrong to cut Christmas trees.
It's not hurting the forest.
It's not hurting the forest, it's not hurting anything, it's actually beneficial.
And that's good, it's good for the local economy, it's good for local.
Exactly.
landlords. So, that's an educational opportunity as well.
Right.
Bring up that point.
All right, I think we beat that one to death, Stephen.
Yes, sir.
We'll go ahead and move on to the next order of business, Harris Pond handicap accessibility. I'll defer that over to Stephen as well.
This was not an item I put on, and I'm not too sure what I would advise if we just table it. I don't know who had suggested, especially when handicap accessibility, it might be something that needs to be recommended to the Park and Rec Advisory Committee as far as more of the appropriate location, but I don't know the meaning or the reason for
I agree.
having it on the agenda. I'm sorry.
It's not tree, it's not tree related.
I don't know what that's about either, so we'll just go ahead and table that to the next meeting. We'll investigate that before the agenda comes out.
And we'll just, for the record, possibly if it just falls under Parks and Rec, Ms. Alexis, we can add it to the agenda for the Park and Rec Advisory Committee.
Yes.
All right, we'll move on to the next order of business, which is Veterans Park.
So Veterans Park, I wanted to discuss, I have huge concern with looking, and you folks, that's why I wanted to get your folks' expertise on it. That lawn, again, it gets watered daily, anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. And I have concern with the species of pine trees that are there. They don't look like they're doing too well. And I wanted to get the tree board's recommendation as far as, in general, any kind of pine tree species, and I know I'm generalizing it, and I apologize about the exact, you folks will correct me for the exact species, on what would be viable, and I wanted to see if we could schedule maybe a possible site visit, and I feel like I need to, and the city needs to start putting a transition plan in place, because I feel that we may not have trees, but I'm not the expert, that's not, but looking at it, I'm fearful that we may not have trees there 3 to 5 years down the road.
Let's have Elizabeth go look. Sometimes trees go through different phases, sometimes they
Okay.
shed their needles seasonally. Let's have Elizabeth look and give a recommendation and see what's happening with them now and what.
And
the
I'd also, recommendation, I did put, there is a request with the mayor and city council at the time that they do vote for what the general fund surplus that they're going to spend in this fiscal year. is I also ask for a recommendation of trees, that's lacking trees to begin with, as far at Harris, I mean, not Harris, excuse me, at Veterans. I know that all the top hill facing 4th Street, everything has died out of there. And on the north end of the park, facing Mills, everything has died on there as well. So want to start looking at what species we could, even if it's 3 a year, at least it's a start.
The junipers are doing well there.
Yeah.
I know.
Is that a effluent water?
It's effluent water.
Effluent, okay, because that definitely needs to be taken into consideration, because that does over time kind of change some of the soil chemistry. But you know what, now that I think about it, I don't think Veterans Park is inventoried. So I think we can meet Elizabeth when she goes out there and get that on the inventory too. There's not a lot of trees, but it'd be good to have that on there as well.
I know that we're going to be working jointly with the Streets Division
Okay.
in order to, this fall, we've got to do it in enough time that we can alert the public, and that way it doesn't affect any, as far as people going to work or school. There is a hazardous tree that's right next to Mills, a Siberian elm, that we're going to look to take down. But we'll discuss that further when it gets closer to that date.
Okay.
But yes, if we could schedule something like that, veterans,
Okay.
I'm just fearful of, I could see change.
Right.
And would like expertise and some recommendations.
Right, and Elizabeth would be the most qualified to make that assessment, because she knows a lot more on that,
Very
so
thorough.
I know my limitations. Okay, so we'll move on to the last order of business, or second to last, which is the tree guards.
So I know there's been discussion, we discussed last meeting about tree guards. So it's a tough place, because the tree guards, like you were saying, Ms. Shannon, because of the string trimmers, can compromise the health and the safety of the tree if it cuts it. And that's probably not the correct term.
So don't worry, no worries.
Okay. But then also we have to where the tree guards can be an eyesore. And I know when I took over as director, it was a major complaint and a concern from citizens. So I know that we want to, so I have spoken with different, just getting advice from different folks. I know, Ms. Shannon, you've provided some information and some education on that. Mr. Vice Chair, you have done that as well. Dr. Spencer, I believe even Ms. Elizabeth Gardner has provided education for that as well. From this point until the end of growing season, Parks Division will not cut with a string trimmer, and be aware of a mower 6 inches from the trunk of the tree. It'll just be a temporary, and then we'll go, I know it'll be a little added, that we'll go and eventually trim once it gets high enough around the tree by hand for now. But this fall, we want to look at a program, and possibly the program I'm looking at, and that's why I want to present it. So if you folks have some thoughts or some ideas for us to look into further, is looking to where we get either a 2-foot or a 3-foot circumference around the trunk of mulch. But we have to do it just right so that we don't have a weed issue and then we're adding more maintenance to our plate. And if it's done right, I believe it works, because if you look at other municipalities, I'm sorry, Ms. Shannon, go ahead.
Mulch rings still are gonna have grass, they're still gonna
Yeah.
have to be weeded. And so, I mean, it's better, but they'll still have to be weeded.
And I believe the occasional is where I'm just hoping that it's not every week that they go out. So say it's a once a month thing that take a few out, not a big issue. Does anybody have any, Paul?
Yeah, if you're gonna use mulch deep enough to inhibit the growth of the grass or whatever, it's gonna need to be like 3 to 4 inches. And don't you run the risk then of the mulch being too high on the trunk and causing problems from that? What about using landscape fabric or something like that?
It's not recommended, landscape fabric isn't recommended around trees.
We've actually had experience with that at Highlands as well. They did go ahead and do some gravel rings around a bunch of the trees there using some high quality landscape fabric. And we actually had to take those out because it was inhibiting the oxygen from reaching the root system. So fabric is not a good or recommended thing around park trees especially. So I know the tree guards work because we've seen them work. And I think Stephen's kind of trying to also look for some direction from the tree board as to what the best thing is. And I know we've had mixed success with those over the years, but you also look at the possibility of, the purchase of all the material for that, having the volunteer base to go ahead and install those. And I can tell you right now, they get forgotten sometimes, and they do cause damage to some of the trees. So I think we have to look at maybe doing the tree guards on some of the smaller ones.
Right.
You're not going to tree guard a 30 dBH tree, right?
Well, they have a thicker bark, but they don't look good whenever you piece them together on the bigger trees, and that's what we.
It looks, yeah.
But they're not an eyesore on the smaller trees, but they have to be loosened up, they have to be loosened.
Yeah, they have to be adjusted, and I think if you would entertain that possibility of on the smaller trees utilizing those still, it would take a dedicated volunteered effort on behalf of the tree board and others to ensure that those are correctly changed yearly or added to, because they can't do that. So my hope in having this discussion with Stephen and you folks is that we can kind of come to some kind of compromise and figure that out for them. Something that's going to be the least amount of maintenance, but still be functional and aesthetically pleasing in the whole 9 yards. So if anybody has any input whatsoever as the proper way to mulch, even as far as the removal of the grass, whether you need to use a sod cutter, the whole 9 yards, any expertise that anybody has to lend to the situation would be much appreciated.
There's a lot of information out there.
Yeah.
To support whatever decision. We can give recommendations on that as well. And I think the tree board's been good at maybe scheduling something annually, the weed removal. So tree guard day or something. I mean,
Right.
Tree board's pretty good at being available to go check on those things. So.
Right, so, and that's something that I know we'd like to continue. So the proposal to not cut up to the trunks was kind of something that I threw at Stephen as a mitigative effort for the next 3 weeks. The growing season's ending, so we don't want to make a concerted effort right now, right? But we have something that serves your purposes, it serves, the safety of the trees for the next month or so. And then over the winter, all these discussions that we're having, we can put together a bona fide approach that will really work in the end, and something they can have shovel ready for the spring.
Sounds good.
Alrighty, so if nobody else has anything to add on tree guards, we'll go ahead and move to other, or if there's any other things that anybody else needed to bring up.
I'd like to bring something up. I'm working on a project called Riverwalk, which covers Lincoln Avenue between Grand and Railroad, and eventually it'll go up and down Railroad from Jackson to Douglas. And that's the replacement of all the sidewalks, putting in lighting, putting in trees, and so forth. Now, I know there's probably not too much along Railroad itself, but there is on Lincoln. And so I would like the tree board to look at the trees that are there, because the engineers, in their opinion, they'll most likely be damaged with the destruction of the concrete. So I don't know if, I hate seeing a tree destroyed, and even if we replace it. So my thought was, well, maybe some of those trees could be removed and put somewhere else. And then in addition to that, we probably need some input on what kind of trees we want to put back. And that'll include what goes on Railroad too, eventually. So we're talking quite a few trees. So I just want to present that to the tree board, if they want to take the effort to look at the trees that are there and see if they can be saved in some fashion or not, as the case may be. And then what are we going to replace them with? And I'd rather have you tell me what needs to go in there rather than an engineer. So.
Okay.
Is this part of the Main Street? Because I think we've
Yes.
commented on the master plan for this several years
You
ago.
may have, I haven't seen anything in writing exactly what's going to go back in there.
And then there's a really good landscape architect / certified arborist who's contracted to Main Street, Amy Bell, and she's,
Oh,
you
okay.
know Amy?
She's the one that did the design.
Yeah, she's good. But I think tree board definitely would like to see that. It's been a few years, we've seen it, but like to see
Okay.
where it's at.
Well, I'm going to draw your attention as well to another thing that you may be interested in. The city tree ordinance actually directs the type of construction that can be done around street trees and mitigated efforts that contractors are supposed to utilize in doing these type of projects. So that's something that could be brought forth to the contractor to help potentially save some of these trees. I think you folks have your own documentation for that. So I just happened to be reading through the tree ordinance the other day and that came up. So there are mitigated efforts that can be put in place for the contractor to follow so that they don't mow up these trees that are going to remain.
But if they're decadent old trees, then maybe they're.
Yeah, it'd be better.
It might be ready.
I went by to look at those trees, because Bill mentioned it at one of the river, Friends of the Riverwalk meeting. And they're big ash trees.
Okay.
I mean, they're like 30, 40 feet tall. It would be a real shame to lose those trees. I didn't evaluate them, I just looked at them and kind of identified what they were, what species they were. They didn't look to be in distress too much. They looked like fairly healthy trees. It seems like that, especially working with Amy Bell and that group, that they should be able to come up with some way to do the project without sacrificing those trees.
Okay. If you want, Mr. Bill, I will give you my contact information at the end of the meeting, and then we could possibly do a walkthrough if you'd like. We can organize a tree board, whoever's willing to, and make sure that we those are on the inventory, but also do a visual inspection of them. And we'd be more than happy to do that for you.
Yeah, this project has moved along without giving any further thought to the trees themselves. And because of COVID, it's been delayed, or else it would have happened way several months earlier. So I'm not sure what thought has been given into the trees in the pre-planning for this project, other than when I talked to the architects, they said these trees have to be removed because they may not survive the construction. So,
Thank you for coming.
I've been meaning to get here sooner, but I'm here.
Well, you know what I've noticed a trend in the last couple of years? There's been a lot more groups and individuals reaching out to the tree board for that very type of advice. And that's what we are here for. And it's good to know that I guess there's word enough in the community that they have the confidence and the faith in the tree board to be able to come forth and do so. So thank you, yes, for coming forth and doing that.
No problem.
Does anybody else have anything to add? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second. Does somebody need to vote not to move? I so move.
Okay, Sullivan has made a motion to adjourn. Second by Paul. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Bill, can I give you this right away, sir, before you go to your office?
What's that?
Not bad. Been a long